Welcome back to Fast Money. Novo Nordisk shares falling almost 3% after ousting CEO Lars Fruergaard Jørgensen. He had been at the helm for 8 years, overseeing the launches of blockbuster drugs Ozempic and Wegovy, but the company recently struggling to keep up with rivals amid growing competition in the weight loss space. Eli Lilly gaining 3.5% today in sympathy with the Novo CEO ouster. Here to unpack all of this is Dr. Kavita Patel. She's an NBC News and MSNBC medical contributor, friend of Fast Money. Always a pleasure to have you, especially here on set.
In-house.
Dr. Patel. The knock on Novo Nordisk, and probably the main driver of its shares lower, is the perception that it's failed in R&D. CagriSema was largely disappointing. It doesn't really have an oral candidate, which is where the puck is going at this point. What can it do? I mean, does this sort of pave the way for a big M&A? Because if you're behind in R&D, it's very hard to catch up.
That's right. You're behind in R&D and you're behind in sales. I mean, Eli Lilly just head-to-head, kind of Ozempic, tirzepatide, the categories. Lilly is just outpacing them almost 3 to 4 to 1. So it is very hard to kind of catch up. But there are a number of incretins in the pipeline. So this space, kind of this entire space, not just GLP-1s, but kind of all the ones that we've been talking about, double G, triple G, like Lilly has, the orals, even though Pfizer pulled theirs back. There's others in the pipeline, some small companies. So I think they should be thinking about kind of what's next. They did put so much into CagriSema. They also did put out some press around, you know, the semaglutide kind of at a higher dose. But with that is likely to come some complications. So I think to be determined whether that could kind of overcome some of this. But they've lost so much market traction.
Has Lilly become the leader?
Lilly, so far, they have, and we're all waiting. Look, retatrutide, as you know, I've been speaking about, kind of eagerly awaiting some of those trials, and they've moved up kind of the expectation for us to get some of those results. So I think there's a lot of hope that's being put on there. I think the oral category is interesting, although I think we've talked about this, that the shots reign supreme, not just in performance, but I think so far in kind of people's preference, too. So we'll see once there's actually a competitive oral. Could that displace it? I think it will. I do think I have a number of patients that said, I just don't want to do a shot for different reasons. And so I think it could. But you've been seeing Lilly and Novo play this game with CagriSema having results that were decent.
They were decent.
Yeah. They weren't terrible. This is what's stunning to me. But they set this expectation, that 25%, and then somehow everything seemed a failure, despite what I would argue as a doctor, 22%, 17%, 15% weight loss is even pretty remarkable. Especially maybe the side effects were an issue, but that's also a problem with tirzepatide. So it is interesting that somehow there's this perception that they're just so inferior. And I think this points again to where Novo's kind of lost a little bit of that narrative, too.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating then the company has just, first of all, great to have you in person. Yeah. Second of all, it's fascinating that the company just basically today said, we're only reiterating our strategy. We're not changing a thing. We're going hard on this. And it's almost a ratification of what they've already done.
Right.
And then getting back to all the things that you know better than I do. But it just seems to me at this point, the company's being penalized for CagriSema as if they didn't have it at all.
At all, right.
And if I look at the stock price and I look at the multiple, look, I've been wrong for the last 20% on this thing, and fortunately not with a lot of money, but more for just my sentiment around it. But it makes it more compelling to me today. Yeah,
I agree. No, it's interesting also. Keep in mind what Novo was known for before this category of drugs. They really are the chronic disease, you know, insulin. This is a class of products that I would argue kind of define diabetes. So these are the very people where you would think, look, they've done this in diabetes, taken a punch to that, done this in weight loss, and they've succeeded in that, but still seem to be suffering kind of for the perceptions. Doctors are clearly prescribing kind of tirzepatide. However, this is a company that should be a leader, just like Lilly, in kind of chronic diseases, because this is what they know. This is what their pipeline has had. This is what they had marketed at. But it did seem like, for different reasons, it just came to a screeching halt. And I am amazed at how much like the prescribing power. One could argue that's kind of just the sales and marketing team, the commercial team that's getting out there. But TikTok has done Ozempic. It's what rolls off the tongue. You don't hear a lot of people rolling off the tongue with Zepbound. They're even referring to Zepbound as Ozempic because that's what people know. So if you can't kind of capitalize on that, that's a rough call.
Yeah. Dr. Patel, we have to leave it there. Great to have you. Come by anytime.
House calls.
Enjoy the game.
Dr. Kavita Patel.
That's right.
That's a good name of a segment. We'll do that next time.
Yeah.